I think it ought to be said in the wake of the grand final triumph of Souths, to put things in a bit of perspective, this is a man who won 5 premierships. He is the only player in rugby league history to have won premierships for 3 different clubs, and on 2 consecutive occasions when he toured with the Kangaroos, he was the player's player. He has been voted in 2008 as one of 100 outstanding players in the history of rugby league. So on that field, he knows a bit about winning, and it means he's a pretty tough cookie, even though he finds this environment, I think, initially a little bit intimidating. Well, recently he was responsible for a motion being passed in the Senate, quote, that a select committee to be known as the Select Committee on certain aspects of Queensland Government administration related to Commonwealth Government affairs be established to inquire into and report on. And there were a range of matters, amongst those how funds appropriated by the Commonwealth to Queensland were used, or the administration of Queensland courts and the judicial system, which has been very controversial with the appointment of a Chief Justice, the approval process for the development of projects for the export of resources, and other matters. So I thought we'd have a yarn with you about all that tonight and what the motivation behind it all is. Glen Lazarus, nice to have you on board. I suppose you're finding this a bit more difficult than a State of Origin game.
Yeah, absolutely. I've said in the past, at least I knew what I was doing on a football field. Yeah, look, obviously jumping into the great unknown for me, and really enjoying the last 3 months when I started as a Senator for Queensland.
They're saying that this stands democracy on its head, and yet, as I understand it, what you're seeking to do is to give people in Queensland who haven't had a voice, to whom no one is listening, and certainly that's the experience from the correspondence I've got, an opportunity to be heard and speak in these various towns to the meetings of the Senate Committee.
Absolutely, Alan. This is since I started, in fact, when I started the campaign back in mid last year, I started getting phone calls, emails and letters, and that slowly but surely snowballed to a stage where even today we were getting phone call after phone call wanting to know how they could put in a submission to the Senate inquiry, and there's a lot of people, hundreds, possibly thousands of people out there just wanting some sort of an environment where they don't feel as though they're going to be harassed, where they feel they can tell people their story in regards to issues that they have had with the Queensland government. This is nothing else. I was elected in October, November last year to represent the state of Queensland and the people living in the state. And as I say, the correspondence is just overwhelming. And I thought that something needed to be done. And so now we have this inquiry, and we will give people their opportunity to speak about their issues with the Queensland government.
Yes, Senator, I think it has to be acknowledged that you manoeuvred fairly well to get this up in the Senate, and clearly did a few deals, let's just call it that, with the Greens. But I'm really quite interested in Premier Campbell Newman's response. There was a story in the Courier Mail that's suggesting that now the federal government are trying, behind the scenes, egging the Premier on to come and try and use this inquiry, turn it into, quote, a royal commission into Clive Palmer. In fact, they even cited, your inexperience as some of the weapon that they were going to use to basically take control of this inquiry and turn it into something that would seek to embarrass Mr. Palmer. Have you seen those reports, and what's your response?
I've been threatened by bigger people, not necessarily uglier people, on a football field, and that doesn't concern me. The Greens are very concerned about the situation up in the Great Barrier Reef and the CSG mining, as I am, and Palmer United. The process in which the committee is set up will take time. We're hoping to get it up and running by early November, and we will be ready and willing and able to make sure, as I said, that people can come along to these various towns in which these committees will be set up and voice and air their concerns about issues they have with the Queensland.
Glenn, one of the clauses of the motion, and Kristina, I'm sure, will come in on this, is the performance measures in relation to Commonwealth funds paid to the state of Queensland. Now, I don't know how much you're familiar with the Wagner Airport in Toowoomba, but 40% of the airspace of the Oki Army Base, 40% has been given to a private sector individual, a millionaire, to enable his airport to be operative. 40%. Now, I should say that when the supporters of of Wagner, went and Julia Gillard was the Prime Minister and her Defence Minister was Stephen Smith, they went to Canberra to lobby for that 40% of airspace. Julia Gillard, to her great credit, said under no circumstances, and Smith, the Defence Minister, to his great credit, wrote a letter to that extent. Gillard then got sacked. Rudd becomes Prime Minister. Rudd thinks he's going to lose the seat of Griffith. He's got problems with planes flying over his airport. McFarlane, the member for Groom, and the Energy Minister, king of coal seam gas, he's mates with Rudd. So obviously a deal is done which says, well, look, we'll give you the airport up here, we'll take the heavy planes out of your electorate, and they can fly here. And suddenly the approval has been given to Wagner to have 40% of the airspace over the Oak Airport for nothing. For nothing. This is what we're talking about. You know, the argument is, oh, this is a witch hunt. Someone has to find some answers here. Have you asked in the Senate where, for example, the Smith letter is? It seems to have gone missing, that said, under the Gillard government, you can't have 40% of the airspace over the Oki Army Base.
Well, I haven't, but I'm hoping that that will surface, obviously, throughout the inquiry. And one of the things that does concern me is some of the issues that I'm sure you've raised, I know you've raised, about the way certain people, landholders, were treated in the building of that airport. And again, this is nothing other than allowing people to come along and tell their story, give their evidence, and then obviously the committee will...
See, Kristina, on that point, there's a woman, a wonderful woman by the name of Heather Brown, a formidable journalist who lives cheek by jowl right next to this airport. Because she was vocal about it with very legitimate complaints, she was burgled and ransacked on 3 occasions. Her computers were stolen, her files were stolen, everything was taken. She made reports to the police. This was raised in the federal parliament last week, I think, Glenn, was it not? And as to what would happen, why did the police do nothing? What was the conspiracy of silence? And people are saying, is there any legitimacy in this inquiry? I'd reckon there's hell of a legitimacy. Ask Heather Brown whether there is or not.
Look, I have to agree with you. There, you know, as I said last week, normally I would be concerned about a federal government inquiring into a state government, and and Professor Anne Toomey from Sydney University has made some very valid points about the legal concerns about an inquiry such as this. But in Queensland, there is no upper house. There is nowhere, no body that can effectively do what this Senate inquiry can do. Absolutely. So, you know, I can see why the Greens and Labor and the Palmer United Party have supported this inquiry. I am curious, though, Senator. The Greens are insisting that this inquiry is going to look at the Bligh government approval of coal seam gas projects, and that's the language Senator Larissa Waters is using. But as I read what this inquiry is going to do, it's going to look at the Commonwealth government's oversight of those approvals. Are the Greens being a little bit mischievous here, or is it a potential that you can, in fact, reach back into the supposedly quarantined Bligh government to look at their actions in terms of the coal seam gas projects?
Well, it's certainly not like the Greens to be mischievous. As I say, this Senate committee has been set up to investigate the current Queensland government. As I say, this Senate committee has been set up to investigate the current Queensland government and no one else.
But if I could just take the point in the motion, Kristina, it does say, which is clause 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, approval process for the development of projects for the export of resources. Now, what that means is, and it's an unchallengeable fact, that $40 billion worth of coal